The financing aspect of it, let's tackle this first, because as we propose these kinds of things, the first thing everybody wants to know is, how do you pay for it? In a public-private partnership of the type that we're proposing, you can't just depend on grants alone. Now, grants are an important aspect of basically jump-starting a program like this to get the capital fund started, but it's neither realistic nor sustainable, as we all know in these days, to depend just on grants to fund something like this. So basically what we're trying to do is set up a sustainable program, and the way to do that, the model to do that, is a revolving loan fund. We kind of tossed around ideas about that earlier. But by definition, a revolving loan fund sustains itself in the long term, and it's not dependent on any kind of anything from political winds shifting or funding doesn't want to happen for whatever reason. It's something that pays for itself in the long run, or keeps itself sustainable in the long run to finance it. So the kinds of stakeholders we had discussed who would be around the table to structure the financing for this, you can see we're just talking potential stakeholders here. Nobody has committed to anything at this point, but this is what we think looks like some of the key people who would be at the table to put the financing together. And it kind of runs the gamut from private equity firms, private banks, local banks who actually are looking for a return on their investment. In other cities, we have seen that these funds do make a modest profit, and sometimes interest or shares of these funds are sold in energy markets or traded on energy markets. So they do expect they have been shown to have a return on the investment. The city, of course, the government plays a key role, at least with the startup grants or something like this. There are various mechanisms that the city can take advantage of to do these specific kinds of projects, and we know that there are at least a couple different. I think Mark mentioned something about issuing bonds or municipal bonds, and I think Madeline might have said something also. There are two specific bonds that the city can issue that are enabled through government through the federal government. One of which is called a Clean Renewable Energy Bond. And other cities have issued these bonds to be able to start up these kind of programs, just specifically to do energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So the city has possibly a chance to take advantage of that. TVA is definitely, we believe, makes a whole lot of sense to be involved as a stakeholder in a program like this. TVA has, of course, committed unprecedented resources and money over the last year or two to expand their energy efficiency programs and their renewable energy programs. Knoxville could be in a unique position to do a pilot program that possibly TVA could fund and replicate in other parts of the state. So we think that they're a very potential player. KEAP, the kinds of, one of the models that we have talked about in terms of the financing, Mark mentioned earlier about, and another version was the Amoresca project, where basically you get the money to fund the energy efficiency projects, and the way you pay the loan back is through the savings on your energy bill. So the role that KEAP would play in that, of course, is just to send that loan bill and process that loan bill for the homeowner through your KEAP bill. So the other aspect of this, inclusive, common sense workforce development, unless you have an intentional process to say, we're going to make this, we want to create this many jobs, we want to hire from this community, and these are the standards that we want. If you're not intentional about that, you don't get it. If you don't say how many folks are going to hire you, you don't know what's going to happen. So creating good paying career track jobs requires engagement of all the stakeholders to develop job quality and labor wage standards, as well as access to quality, common sense, relevant training. And this is a very grassroots oriented process. Ultimately what we're looking at hopefully creating is a community workforce agreement where we get the contractors around the table with the community organizations and other community groups to come up with an agreement on what the labor and wage standards will be for contractors to bid on these retrofit projects. This type of program cannot happen unless there's widespread program awareness and education, and so there's a very clear and vital, critical role for grassroots groups, community organizations, neighborhood organizations to play in educating the community on taking advantage of this kind of program, educating the community on basic things like, look at these curly light bulbs. You know how much money that they would save if you take out that old incandescent bulb, those types of things. SEED actually knows a little bit about this through their listening project. So it's essential to have this grassroots education aspect to this project. So I'm not going to get too deep into stakeholders. I want to leave a little bit of time for the last questions here. So there's the goal setting, evaluation, and quality control. It's getting community consensus with all the stakeholders on things like the project standards for green building and energy efficiency, renewable energy. Second, it's a consensus, a community consensus with everybody. How many homes do we want to try to retrofit in the short term and in the long term? Where do we want to do these projects in the short term and the long term? And then evaluating the data from what has been done and make adjustments as the program goes along. So at this point, we have developed a program framework. The candidates have seen, we have sent a copy of it to them. It is a framework. It is not, every T is not crossed, every I is not dotted in terms of this, but you've seen the basic elements of what we propose it takes to make something like this happen. At this point, we have this framework has been formally endorsed by the Tennessee Solar Energy Industries Association, Socially Equal Energy Efficient Development, Statewide Organizing for Community Empowerment, Tennessee Solar Energy Association, and the Tennessee Alliance for Progress. Thank you.
That was Mr. Rick Hale, who's a member of KEAP Green Job Steering Committee. Excellent job. I would like to ask our two candidates to come back to the stage. Hope you were paying attention because now's the test. 3 final questions. Question number 1. How would you propose to increase public-private partnerships to expand the current programs which weatherize and solarize low to moderate income family homes? You understand the question? Very good. We'll start with you, Mrs. Romero.
Well, I think some potentials were identified in the slideshow. I know when I read the proposal that you all sent, you talked about the CDFIs, the Community Development Financial Institutions. That's one source to look at. And I know at one point the Urban League was looking to become a CDFI locally. I'm not sure if that has happened yet or not. Has it already happened? Okay. It made me think about the Community Reinvestment Act requirements that banks have, CRA funding. I think that's something we should also look at locally as potential funding sources. Of course, some startup grants, we have some foundations, and I don't know anything about the clean renewable energy bonds. It's something that I would have to look into. I really don't know that. But so the combination of public-private, like was mentioned in the slideshow, I think is the way to approach it.
Thank you.
I think that, again, the slide, revolving loans, KEB, the financing from KEB, and then the clean energy bonds, I think are all potentials to increase these programs.